The emperor was so hung up with fashion that he spent all his time and plutocrat on his wardrobe. He'd frequently hold fashion shows and invite the stylish knitters and contrivers from each over the area to showcase their rearmost creations. One day, two swindlers came to the area and claimed to be the stylish needlewomen in the land. They said that their clothes were so fine and special that only the wisest and most intelligent people could see them. The emperor, eager to show off his intelligence and impress his subjects, commissioned them to make him a new suit. The two swindlers pretended to weave the most intricate and beautiful fabric, but in reality, they weren't wearing anything at all. They asked the emperor for further plutocrats and further time to finish the suit, and the emperor, dazed by his vanity, agreed. Eventually, the swindlers presented the emperor with his new suit. Of course, the emperor couldn't see anything because there was nothing there. But he did not want to admit it, allowing that he might not be wise or intelligent enough to see the suit. He decided to wear the suit in a grand cortege through the area, allowing that he'd admit numerous respects on his new outfit. As he walked through the thoroughfares, the townspeople, too hysterical to be seen as lower intelligent than the emperor, praised his new clothes. But one stalwart little boy spoke up and said, "But the emperor is not wearing anything at all." The people realized the verity and began to laugh. The emperor, embarrassed and shamed, eventually saw the verity and understood that his vanity and desire to appear intelligent had caused him to be wisecracked by the swindlers. He learned that true confidence doesn't come from the clothes we wear or the way we look, but from within. The swindlers promised to produce the most beautiful fabric that will make the emperor look majestic and important. The emperor is intrigued by the idea of wearing such an extraordinary piece of apparel and agrees to pay the swindlers a large sum of plutocrats to produce the fabric. The swindlers pretend to work lifelessly, day and night, on their imaginary looms, pretending to weave the fabric while requesting further plutocrats for the fine vestments they claim to use. The emperor, who's too proud to admit that he cannot see the fabric, pretends to respect the cloth and commends the needlewomen on their work. The needlewomen, who are doing nothing, pretend to cut and suture the fabric into the emperor's new suit. The emperor is agitated to wear his new clothes, and processions in front of his people, fully ignorant that he's wearing nothing at all. The people, not wanting to appear stupid, pretend to respect the emperor's new suit as he processions through the thoroughfares. It's only when a youthful boy in the crowd points out the emperor's bareness that the vision is shattered, and the people realize that the swindlers had tricked them all. The emperor, embarrassed and shamed, realizes that his vanity had dazed him to the verity. He learns the significance of honesty and tone, confidence, and how it's more important to be true to oneself than to try to impress others. In the end, the emperor admits his mistake and apologizes to his people for his foolishness. He learns to accept himself for who he is and not to calculate the opinions of others to define his worth. The swindlers pretend to weave the fabric on their looms, using unnoticeable thread and pretending to work lifelessly day and night. The emperor eagerly sends his most trusted counsels to check on the progress of the fabric, but none of them can see it, as they all believe they're unfit for their positions or are simply too stupid to see it. The swindlers ultimately finish the garment and present it to the emperor. He's amazed by its supposed beauty and cannot stay to wear it in a grand procession through the megacity. Still, he cannot see the fabric either, but pretends that he can, as he doesn't want to be allowed off as stupid or unfit for his position. The day of the procession arrives, and the emperor proudly marches through the megacity wearing his new unnoticeable clothes. The people of the megacity, who have heard of the magical fabric, also pretend to see the clothes, as they don't want to be allowed off as unfit or stupid. Still, a youthful boy in the crowd sees through the deception and loudly proclaims that the emperor is wearing no clothes at all. At first, the people try to silence him, but ultimately, they begin to realize that the boy is right. The emperor, embarrassed and shamed, realizes that he has been wisecracked by the swindlers and his vanity. Still, he also realizes that his people still admire him, not for his clothes or appearance, but for his leadership and character. In the end, the emperor learns the significance of tone, confidence, and that it isn't the clothes you wear that make you great, but rather the rates and conduct that define you as a person. He apologizes to his people and pledges to be a better leader, with a focus on the well-being of his citizens, rather than his vanity. The swindlers continue to deceive the emperor and his ministers, who pretend to respect the fabric indeed, though they cannot see it. The emperor is so thrilled with the supposed magical fabric that he decides to wear it in a grand cortege through the megacity. The swindlers dress him in the unnoticeable fabric, and the emperor sets off on his cortege, induced that he's wearing the most magnificent garment in the world. The people of the megacity are agitated to see the emperor's new clothes, but as the cortege passes by, they begin to brood to each other that they cannot see any clothes on the emperor. Still, they're hysterical to speak up and admit that they cannot see anything, so they continue to pretend to respect the emperor's new clothes. Suddenly, a small child speaks up and declares that the emperor isn't wearing any clothes at all. The people start to murmur in agreement, and soon everyone is laughing and pointing at the emperor. The emperor and his ministers are lowered, and the swindlers are nowhere to be set up. The emperor realizes that he has been foolish to believe in the swindlers and to watch so important about his appearance. He learns that true beauty comes from within, and that tone, confidence is more important than any material possession. From that day forward, the emperor vows to be more honest and humble and to concentrate on developing his inner strength and character. The emperor dons his new clothes and sets out on his cortege, with the swindlers by his side. The townspeople lining the thoroughfares are hysterical to be seen as stupid, so they all pretend to see the magnificent fabric that the emperor is wearing, indeed though they see nothing at all. They all phenomenon at the fabric's colors and patterns, esteeming the emperor's excellent fashion sense. The emperor is pleased with the praise he receives and continues to strut down the road, believing that he truly is wearing a magical fabric that only the best and intelligent can see. Still, a small child in the crowd, who's too youthful to understand the social morals, speaks up and says, "The emperor has no clothes." The townspeople are stunned by the child's honesty, and they start to murmur in agreement. Eventually, everyone realizes that they've been wisecracked, and they start to laugh at the emperor's expenditure. The emperor is embarrassed and lowered, but he realizes the verity of the child's words. He learns that tone confidence shouldn't come from the opinions of others, but from within oneself. The emperor decides to change his ways and concentrate on being a good leader, rather than trying to impress others with his appearance. The youthful boy's words cut through the silence and expose the verity. The emperor is indeed not wearing any clothes. The townspeople are shamed that they've been so foolish and that they've allowed their fear of being seen as stupid to eyeless them to the verity. Still, the emperor continues to believe that he's wearing a magical fabric that only the good can see. The youthful boy's courage and honesty inspire others to speak up as well. One by one, the townspeople admit that they cannot see the fabric either, and the emperor eventually realizes the verity. He feels ashamed of his vanity and the foolishness of his conduct. As the emperor returns to his palace, he reflects on the significance of tone, confidence. He realizes that he'd been so consumed with the idea of appearing superior and emotional to others that he lost touch with his true tone. The youthful boy's honesty reminded him of the significance of being true to oneself and not letting the opinions of others mandate one's sense of tone, worth. The emperor's experience teaches him that true confidence comes from within and that it cannot be bought or created by the opinions of others. He vows to be a better leader and to hear the opinions of others, especially the youthful and honest members of his community. As the emperor processions through the thoroughfares, the youthful boy's words spread among the crowd, and people begin to brood to each other that the emperor is indeed not wearing any clothes. Sluggishly, but surely, the people's fear of being seen as stupid or unfit is overcome by their consummation of the verity. Despite the growing murmur, the emperor continues to hold his head grandly, trying to maintain his quality and not wanting to admit that he has been deceived. But as further and further people start to openly mock him and laugh at him, the emperor begins to feel his confidence slipping down. He begins to misdoubt himself and wonders how he could have been so foolish to fall for the swindler's falsehoods. As the cortege eventually comes to an end, the emperor returns to his palace feeling embarrassed and shamed. He realizes that his preoccupation with appearance and what others suppose of him has clouded his judgment and led him down a path of dishonesty and deceitfulness. He begins to understand that true tone confidence comes from within and that he needs to be true to himself and not worry about what others suppose of him. As the youthful boy's words spread, the townspeople began to brood amongst themselves, realizing that they too had been wisecracked by the swindler's falsehoods. Sluggishly, purely surely, their fear of being seen as stupid dissipated, and some indeed started to laugh at the asininity of the situation. The emperor and his ministers were exposed as frauds, and their lack of tone, confidence, and vanity was laid bare for all to see. The emperor could feel his face glowing with shame, but he still refused to admit that he'd been wisecracked. Rather, he chose to continue with the cortege, pretending that he was wearing the most exquisite fabric in all the land. His ministers, inversely ashamed of their vanity, followed along quietly behind him. As they walked, still, the emperor could not help but notice that the townspeople were no longer looking at him with admiration, but rather with recreation and indeed misprision. The youthful boy's words had opened their eyes to the foolishness of their ways, and they could no longer be wisecracked by the emperor's grandiose visions. Eventually, the emperor reached the end of the cortege route and retreated to his palace, lowered and alone. But as he looked into the glass, he realized that he'd learned an important assignment. He understood that true tone, confidence doesn't come from the blessing of others, but from within. He pledged to be more humble in the future and to no way let his vanity and tone, mistrustfulness get the stylish of him again. The emperor realizes that his obsession with his appearance was deceived and superficial and that his true worth isn't defined by his apparel. He comes to understand that true confidence comes from within and that he can be a great leader without the trappings of wealth and feathers. As a result of his newfound understanding, the emperor decides to use his power and influence to make positive changes in the area. He begins to concentrate on perfecting the lives of his people, rather than on his image, and works lifelessly to promote the weal of his subjects. In time, the emperor becomes given for his wisdom, compassion, and fidelity to justice, and he's deified by his people as a true leader. His tone, confidence, and inner strength allow him to inspire others to follow his illustration, and he becomes a symbol of stopgap and progress for the entire area. In the end, the emperor's experience with the swindlers and the youthful boy who spoke up against him tutored him a precious assignment about the significance of tone, confidence, and modesty. He learned that true greatness comes from within and that the respect and admiration of others are earned through noble deeds and a commitment to the common good. As the emperor walks through the thoroughfares, he is surprised to hear cheers and applause from the people, despite his lack of fancy apparel. He realizes that his true worth isn't in his appearance, but in his character, and that the people admire him for who he is, not what he wears. The emperor begins to understand that his preoccupation with apparel and appearance was a reflection of his lack of tone, confidence. He believed that he demanded to wear the finest clothes to be admired and respected, but in reality, it was his tone, assurance, and leadership that won the hearts of his people. As he reflects on the events of the day, the emperor realizes that he'd been too concerned with outside appearances and that he neglected the significance of inner traits similar to honesty, modesty, and tone confidence. He resolves to be a better sovereign, one who values these inner traits above all differently, and who leads with a true sense of purpose and conviction. From that day on, the emperor's rule is marked by his newfound modesty and honesty. He focuses on perfecting the lives of his people and works to be a positive influence in their lives. The people respond in kind, and the area indications under his wise and just leadership. In the end, the emperor learns that tone, confidence comes from within, and that true success and happiness cannot be set up in material effects but in the strength of one's character. He'd been tutored a precious assignment, one that he'd no way forget, and one that he'd use to guide him throughout the rest of his reign.